Ryan spun around and rushed to the bedroom door, twisting the handle with both hands until it finally gave way. He stumbled into the hallway, his flashlight beam darting wildly across the walls as panic replaced every attempt to stay calm. The yellow warning on the window still echoed in his mind. Leave before midnight. He didn't care what was happening anymore, he just wanted to get out. As he hurried down the staircase, the silence was suddenly broken by the slow, heavy ticking of the grandfather clock in the living room. Ryan stopped for only a second to look at it. Earlier that night, the clock had been completely still, its hands frozen in place. Now it was alive. The pendulum swung from side to side, and the hands crept toward 12 with frightening precision. It read 11:59 p.m. Ryan ran to the front door and grabbed the handle, but it wouldn't move. He pulled harder, throwing all his weight against it, yet the old wooden door remained firmly shut, as though someone on the other side was holding it closed. His breathing became faster with every failed attempt. Then came the sound that made him freeze. Knock, knock, knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks echoed through the house. Ryan stepped back and looked through the dusty glass beside the door. Standing in the pouring rain was the same old man from the highway. He hadn't moved at all. Rain poured from the brim of his hat, hiding his face in shadow. For several long seconds, he simply stared toward the house. Then very slowly, he raised one finger to his lips, silently warning Ryan not to make a sound. Without lowering his hand, he lifted the other arm and pointed toward the staircase. Ryan turned. The little girl in the yellow raincoat was standing at the top of the stairs. This time she wasn't hiding behind her wet hair. Her pale face was visible, and her expression wasn't angry or frightening. It was desperately sad, as if she had been trying to warn him from the very beginning. Another flash of lightning illuminated the hallway, and Ryan noticed something impossible. Her feet weren't touching the floor. She floated silently a few inches above the old wooden steps. Before Ryan could move, the grandfather clock began striking midnight. 1, 2, 3. Each chime echoed louder than the last, shaking the walls of the farmhouse. As the 12th and final chime rang out, every light inside the house went dark at once. A freezing wind swept through the rooms, even though every window was closed. Then came the sound of children laughing, not one child but dozens of them, echoing from every direction at the same time. Footsteps thundered across the upstairs hallway, doors slammed one after another, and whispers filled the darkness with voices Ryan couldn't understand. Suddenly, the front door unlocked with a loud click. Ryan didn't hesitate. He threw it open and sprinted into the storm, running through the forest without looking back. Branches whipped across his face as he pushed through the trees, certain that something was following only a few steps behind. He could hear footsteps matching his own, always just out of sight. After several desperate minutes, he burst out of the forest expecting to reach the highway. Instead, he stopped dead in his tracks. Standing directly in front of him was the same old farmhouse. Ryan couldn't breathe. He stared at the farmhouse, unable to understand how it was possible. He had run in a straight line for what felt like several minutes, yet somehow he had returned to the exact place he had escaped. The storm raged overhead, but everything else had become unnaturally still. Even the wind seemed to have stopped. Slowly, the yellow light appeared once again in the upstairs window, as if the house were inviting him back inside. Before Ryan could decide what to do, the front door creaked open by itself. With nowhere left to run, and convinced that something inside the house held the answer, he stepped across the doorway one final time. The farmhouse was no longer the place he had entered earlier. The dust had vanished. The furniture looked clean, candles burned throughout the rooms, and the air felt strangely warm. The wall that had once held scratched family photographs was now covered with hundreds of perfectly preserved pictures. Ryan walked closer, studying each one. Every photograph showed different people standing in front of the farmhouse: families, travelers, police officers, hikers, and strangers from different decades. They were all smiling at the camera. As his eyes moved across the wall, His heartbeat slowed. Near the end of the collection hung the newest photograph. It wasn't faded like the others. It looked as though it had been taken only moments ago. Ryan's blood ran cold. The picture showed him standing on the front porch in the middle of the storm, staring directly at the camera with fear written across his face. He had no memory of anyone taking that photograph. A soft voice spoke behind him. "You weren't brought here by the storm. The storm only brought you back." Ryan turned around, expecting to see the little girl. The room was empty. The voice had disappeared, but the words lingered in his mind. Before he could move, every photograph on the wall began falling to the floor one after another. Glass shattered across the room as hundreds of frames crashed at once. The grandfather clock struck a single loud chime, and the front door burst open. A freezing wind rushed through the farmhouse, extinguishing every candle. Ryan ran without stopping. This time he didn't look back. He pushed through the forest until the trees finally opened onto the highway. His car was exactly where he had left it. The engine started on the first turn of the key, and by the time the sun began rising over the horizon, the rain had stopped as though the storm had never happened. Later that morning, Ryan returned with the police. He led them to the exact spot where the forest path had been. They searched for hours, but there was nothing there. No farmhouse, no clearing, no broken porch, not even a narrow trail leading into the woods. The officers assumed exhaustion, and the storm had caused Ryan to become disoriented. Eventually, he stopped trying to convince anyone. Weeks turned into months, and the memory slowly became something he forced himself not to think about. Then one evening, another heavy storm rolled across the city. As Ryan cleaned the inside of his car before driving home, something slid out from beneath the driver's seat. It was an old photograph. His hands began to shake before he even picked it up. It was the same picture he had seen hanging inside the farmhouse, the one showing him standing on the porch in the rain. This time he turned it over. Written on the back in faded black ink were 7 simple words: "We'll be waiting when the rain returns." Ryan never drove that highway again. Even now, whenever heavy rain begins to fall and the radio suddenly fills with static, he pulls over long before he reaches the forest. Because deep down, he knows that somewhere beyond those trees, a warm yellow light is still glowing, patiently waiting for the next traveler who believes it's only a house.